Hi guys, hi, how's it going? How you doing today? Hopefully today finds you well. Today I am doing my next palette review in my palette roulette series in which I pick a palette. It's in my collection, might also be in your collection, and I utilize it for a couple weeks and I come back to you. I tell you about my experiences with the palette. I show you some pictures of the looks I was able to create with the palette, and I show you some live swatches, and then we pull another palette. It's not necessarily about the brandest newest palette on the market, but sometimes it works out that way. Most of the time it's just I've got this in my collection. I'm trying to move on through the palettes in my collection, utilize everything that I have in my collection, and tell you about my thoughts and experiences with those things. That's what I'm here for. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, today I'll be going over these two palettes. I have the Melt Bad Side Zodiac palette and the LA Girl FESTIE Bestie palette, and I'll be talking through those, and I hope that you'll want to stick around. For those of you new here, hi, my name is Donna. I'm a lover of all things high-end, colorful beauty and self-care. I also work in the beauty industry as a field leader for Ulta, so I get a lot of education from my position, and I like to bring you that education here on my platform, but I also just kind of like to talk about makeup. I'm a very chatty channel here. Anybody down in that comment section can tell you that, and I hope that chatty and educational and fun is what you're looking for, because you have found the right place to be if that is the case. And I hope that you'll want to subscribe before you go. With that said, let's roll into this palette roulette, because I've actually had these for 3 weeks and I've been using them for 3 weeks, and I am excited to move on. So let's talk about these palettes. So today we'll be going over these two palettes here. I have the LA Girl FESTIE Bestie. This was part of their Young, Wild, and Free collection that they came out with last year around festival time. And then I also have the Melt Bad Zodiac palette. I did choose Earth to purchase, number one, but also to do in this lineup with the FESTIE Bestie palette. Let's start with this, which is the LA Girl FESTIE Bestie palette. Like I said, this is part of their Young, Wild, and Free eyeshadow collection, which consisted of 2 eyeshadow palettes. I'll put a picture up here for you guys to see. One being a really colorful palette, and the other one being a very neutral, like brown leaning, kind of natural toned eyeshadow palette. It was limited edition, and this is no longer for sale on the Ulta Beauty website that I could find, but it is still available on LA Girl. The premise behind this was that, number one, it's festival wear, but number two, it's about besties always come in duos, right? And in those duos, there's typically one of them being a neutral lover and the other one being kind of an outlandish in your face kind of color lover, right? And when I think of myself and my bestie, I definitely think that that's the case. Like, when I think of some of my best friends in the world, most of them are neutral loving girls, and then there's me, who is the in-your-face, colorful, outlandish one. Funny story, I'm usually the least likely to get out there and put myself out there and be extroverted like that, but I do wear some colorful eyeshadow. Today, not so much. That was the premise behind these two palettes. So this is the LA Girl FESTIE Bestie palette, and the front of the palette looks like this. It's beautiful. It's got, you know, kind of palm trees over here. It's got a daisy over here. It's just a really beautiful like summery scape, right? And it says FESTIE Bestie across it. It is a nice like acrylic plastic packaging. Just says LA Girl FESTIE Bestie on it. And the back of it looks like this. It does have all the shades and the shade names on it, so you can see how colorful this palette really is. Up here it says LA Girl Young, Wild, and Free. That is the collection name, consisting of 2 16-pan eyeshadow palettes. And then just some information about the company and the palette itself. And then when you open it up, you do have a really, really nice size mirror here. And then this is the color story of this palette. I do have to say that I think that this is a wonderful palette for travel because it clasps shut. It's a nice, strong clasp and it stays stable. I love that it folds flat so you can lay it flat down on your desk, or it kind of will stand up on its own as well, so that you have a little bit of a like vanity situation if you need to. And this mirror is gigantor. So let's start with the price. This guy is $18, and that is not bad. That is an amazing price for such truly higher end kind of packaging as far as a plastic packaging goes. It's got a giant mirror on it. This is better than I would say most drugstore options give you as far as the size of the mirror. This does have 1.23 ounces of product in it, which means that each one of the eyeshadows in this palette has 0.077 ounces of product in it, or 0.08 ounces, which means that each one of these pans of eyeshadow is about the same amount of eyeshadow in it as what comes in a full-size Natasha Denona pan in her full-size palettes. Amazing. It will probably take you years to go through this. So there are 16 shades in this, and of those 16 shades, you do have 6 mattes, 1 matte that does have glitter in it, and then the rest are shimmers. So that is 9 shimmers and 7 quasi mattes, which, as far as I'm concerned, the ratio is a little bit too heavy on the shimmer side. I do like a really good matte. I love matte in my eye looks. I wear mattes mostly. The only place that there's a shimmer in my eye looks typically is on the lid space, maybe in the inner corner. But even on the inner corner and the brow bone, typically I use a really light matte eyeshadow shade. I don't think that it's necessarily a make or break for me. Obviously, I purchased the palette. I purchased everything in my collection, and I purchased it with as many shimmers as what's in here, but it does say that there are matte shimmers and foil finishes in here, and I don't really think that there is a difference unless we're talking this white shade here, which is quite chunky. Maybe that's the metallic and the rest are just shimmers. I'm not really sure. The good news about these shimmers is they perform satiny enough to also use in like the crease in the outer corner, and not necessarily just as a lid shade, which I know some people have a problem with that. Some people do not. The other thing is, like I mentioned, this does have a matte shade that does have glitter in it, and typically that would not be something that I loved using. I find that glitter in mattes typically will lend to a patchier build or blend, and that just wasn't the case with this guy. It did work very, very well as a matte without the glitter in it. You couldn't even tell. It's in my eye look today. You couldn't even tell that there was glitter in that matte. This does promote itself as intensely pigmented though, and I am going to stand on this hill and say this is not super pigmented. Every single one of these mattes, you have to build up to get the opacity out of it that you want, or even what is showing in this palette. So this orangish reddish tone down here is really quite pale and almost peachy on an eye look. This green here is nowhere near this color on an eye look. Even with a white base, it's nowhere near this color on an eye look. And this blue definitely is not this deep in an eye look. You do have to build it and add this gray. Yes, I said gray, into it to build up to this color at all. This is nowhere near a black. If it was supposed to be a black, I feel sorry for whoever thought that that was a black. It's more of like a charcoal gray, a really deep charcoal gray, but definitely not a black. If you want it to be black, you could probably get it close to black, but you definitely have to build and build and build. I'm not super impressed with the mattes in this palette. Now, y'all know I love LA Girl. I use nothing, for the most part, nothing but their eyeliners in my eyes. On my eyes. I love their pencil liners and lip liners so much. Those Shockwave ones are hands down my favorite eyeliners, and they're like $3 or $4 a piece, maybe 5 tops. I picked this palette up because I love those eyeliners and was just floored by using those eyeliners and having the whole performance out of those eyeliners that I have from a drugstore eyeliner. So I picked this palette up thinking that maybe their eyeshadows were going to have the same kind of structure and performance and quality, really, that those eyeliners do. And I didn't find that to be true. Do I think it's a horrible palette? No, but what I will say is that even for the price, I don't think that this palette is worth it. And I say that because I have, like, by Beauty Bay, their palettes are phenomenal, same price. And I would partner them off with a Natasha Denona. I would partner them off with maybe even a Pat McGrath. I would definitely partner them off with any ABH palette as the same. And this is just nowhere near. And it's the same price. Actually, at $18, it's more than what you can pick up a Beauty Bay palette for. So I would definitely not say that this is worth that $18. Maybe 10, maybe 11, maybe like ColourPop price tag ish, but even ColourPop is getting up there in price too. So I don't necessarily believe that this is 100% worth it. I will say it's not super pigmented, but these are very blendable and easy to use and buildable shadows. So you can get the pigmentation that you desire out of the mattes. You just have to be willing and able to work for it. The shimmers though, the shimmers are pretty impactful. They're beautiful. And like my favorite is probably this one and this one. And this blue is really pretty. This is horrible. So chunky, not even worth having it in the palette. I didn't like using it at all. Not on my face, not on my eye. The rest of them are not bad, but they're also not amazing. This purple is probably the most lackluster purple shimmer that I have in my collection. These two are not bad, but I feel like it's really hard to do an orange or gold shimmer wrong, in my humble opinion. This red I liked using more as almost as a matte than I did as a shimmer. In addition to the fact that like the mattes didn't really impress me and the shimmers were kind of meh, the wear time on this is poop. I always do my eyes first. I would put an eye look on, which is also a big point of contingency. There's so much fallout with this palette, so much. And fallout is not a thing that I count against a palette because I just don't care. Sometimes palettes that fall out are honestly some of my favorites. ABH is one of my favorite brands as far as formulation goes for eyeshadows, and they fall out all over the place. So fallout isn't a make or break for me, but there was so much fallout with this. So doing your eyes first is going to be something that you'll want to do. I would put on my eye look and then I would do the rest of my face, and then I would have to go in about an hour into having the eye look on and tap it back out and reapply sometimes or reblend sometimes because there was already creasing with the shimmer shades, which is why I said they work better. Most of them work better, in my humble opinion, buffed out and put into like quasi matte form, because then you're not having to deal with like packing it into a place and having it crease on you. I was not super impressed with this palette in a nutshell. Will I keep it in my collection? Probably, but I am going to do some due diligence and trying to dupe it out and see if I have a lot of these shades that like I was more fascinated with in this palette, because I do think that with all the other palettes that I have in my collection, you guys should have seen my palette collection and declutter at this point in time, and I opened up every single one of those palettes. So I'm certain I have some of my favorite shades out of here in other palettes, but like this one I'm just curious about. This one I'm a little curious about. This one I'm a little curious about. And this blue I do think is unique to my collection. I don't think that I have another blue like this in my collection. So there are some shades in here that I really do like. And like I said, if I have the time to build it up, it can get the color that I want it to be. But I wasn't super impressed with this, and this will probably lend to me really not looking at purchasing an LA Girl palette in the future. The rest of their products, sure. But I can't say that this is going to be something that I'm going to want to continue to add to my collection of in the future. I would say wear time on this was approximately tops 5 hours. I would even venture to say 4 before noticeable fading. And if you're using shimmers on your lid space and packing them onto your lid space, probably 2 before you notice creasing. I do like the packaging. I do like the color story. I'm not a super fan of it. And to top it off, it is limited edition. I get it. But it's already less than a year later, not for sale anymore anywhere but LA Girl's website. And there's no reviews for this palette in terms of like star rating. I couldn't find anything, not even on the LA Girl website. So there's that. The other thing I don't 100% love about this is that the names of the shades are on the back, and the names of the shades are also on this guy. But there's plenty of space in between the shades to put the name of the shade on the actual palette, and they're not there. And that kind of drives me bonkers, if I'm honest. So let's swatch these really quick. And I'm just going to go, row by row. Top, next, next, next. So the first shade here is Blur, and this is the white, metallic or foil shade that is in the palette, and it is by far the worst shadow in this palette. It's pretty, but it's really, really chunky. It falls out all over your face. It falls out all over into your eyelashes and everywhere. It's kind of a hot mess of a shadow. Then we have this one, which is Bestie, and this is kind of a gold, kind of an orange or peachy leaning gold shimmer. Then we have this like orange leaning gold shimmer in the palette called Heat. And then we have this orange matte called Detour. This whole row reminds me of candy corn. The next row is the like chartreusey green, and it is a matte, and it is called Love and Life. I really did love this one to like buff out other shadows in the palette. It was really pretty in that way. I also liked it a lot as an inner corner, but it wasn't a super fantastic shadow in this palette. And this one is called Sequin, and it is kind of a bluish silver, and it's a shimmer. And then we have Too Hot, which is the red tone shimmer that I told you I used more as a matte. And I think that you guys can see there's just not a whole lot of impact to that. So I found that if I used a fluffy brush, it performed really well as a matte in any eye look. So that's kind of what I used it for. And then this one top down is the matte that does have glitter in it. But I mean, I think that you can see the glitter in the swatch, but it doesn't perform like that on the eye. You can not see the glitter at all on the eye. I found that it didn't impact the blend of that shadow either, which, like I said, typically I'm not a glitter and mattes fan, because glitter and mattes, in my humble opinion and in my experience, will impact how that matte blends. We have first this one, which is Playlist. This is actually one of my favorites in this palette. It is a really pretty like minty green with almost like a gold kick to it. And then Daisy Dukes, which is a blue, like turquoisey blue metallic. Then we have Space Buns, which is a pink matte. You guys hopefully can see just how dismal that pink matte is. And then we have Destination, which is, I would say, a milky peach. Again, really kind of dismal as far as those swatches go. You can see the shimmers are really not bad, but man, those mattes are really, really not great. And I'm going to show you, like I said, it's been about 40 minutes because my mom called. Look at the mattes on this hand now. This one here, the chartreusey green, it's almost gone. This one is starting to fade away already towards the bottom. It's been an hour, you guys. The last four, this one is cactus, and this one is actually really pretty too. I kind of really liked it. It was a green, really impactful in an eye look, really pretty. I love specifically pairing that one with the kind of mintier one down here. Then we have this matte, which is Drip. This is the blue matte in the palette. It is not this opaque in an eye look. And then we have this purple shimmer called Journey. Really the most uninspiring purple shimmer of my life. And then we have, I'm not sure that this was supposed to be a black, but this is called After Party, and it's more of a charcoal. If it was supposed to be a black, it's not a great black, but those are the shadows in the FESTIE Bestie palette. These ones are definitely the more dismal of the bunch, but they're all just not fantastic. Like, I think that the shimmers are not bad, but I also hesitate to say that they're good because I know that you can get better shadows than this from brands that are doing it for the same amount of money or less better. I don't see this lasting a grand old time in my collection. I'm just not super impressed with it. I'm not mad at it, but I'm not super impressed with it. The other palette that I was using during this last several weeks is the Melt Bad Zodiac Earth palette. This is a $38 palette, but if you were looking at this like collection, because there's air, earth, fire, and water, if you were looking at this collection, it is on sale right now. You can get all four of the palettes for $80 on the Melt Cosmetics website. They were $38 a piece. So that's a damn good deal in my humble opinion, because I paid $40 for this little tiny palette. This is the Melt Bad Side Zodiac Earth palette, and it is for Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. And I really like the packaging of it. It is a little bit tactile. You can feel the rays or the indent of the letters in it. It has like the stars on the palette, and it is a really pretty like dark green shade. And the back of the palette looks like this. It just has the zodiac signs that this palette caters to, and then the information about Melt. When you open it up, it does have a mirror. It says Earth, Melt Cosmetics, and then this little saying right here in the center says the only right way is your way, we know. And that's because this is the bad zodiac, or bad side zodiac palette, which means all of the shadows in this palette are named after the bad traits of this zodiac sign. So the names of these shades going like straight across and then straight across are Heart of Stone, Way Harsh, Overcritical, Know-It-All, RBF, Materialistic, Type A, and Stubborn. And I would say those don't describe me whatsoever. I think I have some friends that would tell you otherwise. Maybe even some family members that would tell you otherwise. I feel personally attacked by the names of these shadows because, and I think I've said that before, these pretty much describe me to a T. I'm definitely type A. I don't necessarily think I'm a know-it-all, but I remember there was one time that I had a district manager who was talking to me about something, and I said, well, blah, 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 blah. I could be wrong, but, and she looked at me and she goes, you're not often wrong, Donna. And that's when I knew I was in trouble. I'm just saying. So there's that. Listen, I don't always have to be right, but 9 times out of 10, I have done my homework and I know I'm right. I'm just saying. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I am not that awful. I am not that awful. I'm going to say that over and over again. This is what they would consider a mini palette. So these eyeshadows in here are 0.035 ounces per pan. So they are little. They're about the same size as a bigger, like, you know, the 30 pan eyeshadow palettes by ColourPop. The shadows in here are about that same size. Not bad, honestly. They have as much product in them as the full-size ABH, old full-size ABH palettes do, so not a bad amount of shadow. I think that when you're looking at the palette just in and of itself, it looks very ho-hum and kind of boring. But I do really love the color story in this palette, to be honest. I think that it leans a little bit grungy. It's very earthy. I think that you have a really beautiful purple here and a really beautiful green, a nice peach, a really nice brown. I think that the yellow kind of brings it home for me, and the fact that there's only 3 shimmers and 5 mattes makes me really love this palette, because that lends to the variety that you're able to see from utilizing this palette. There is a lot of different eye looks that you can get utilizing this palette. For instance, in my eye look today, I do have these 2 shades here. And because this brown is laid down first, this purple looks more brown than it does purple. And that is where I'm going with the variety in this palette. It's crazy to me how many different eye looks I was able to get out of this little tiny 8-pan eyeshadow palette that doesn't look like it's got much of a, you know, aspect of variety to it. So with that said, this is also a limited edition palette by Melt Cosmetics. It is their holiday 2022 release. So whereas this one is really new, this one was not. There are 8 shades in here inspired by the earth tones and the earth sign, and the colors that really represent the earth sign, and kind of leans a little bit grungy, which I really like. There are 5 mattes and 3 shimmers, as I said, and they are perfectly represented in this palette to pair off each other to lend to the variety of eye looks that you can get. The mattes and shimmers in here are so pigmented. I would say though that they didn't disappoint me in their pigmentation, in that they are very much like a normal matte melt formula or normal matte or normal shimmer melt formula, but they did feel a little bit different. I feel like these in this palette were maybe a little less heavy or dense or thick or hard pressed, if that makes any sense. They just, I felt like blended easier, built easier, and provided a little bit less finickiness than typical melt shadows do. However, I did feel like that because they were a little more soft, a little less dense, that they fell out a little bit more. Today, I didn't really have a whole lot of that problem going on in my eye look, but I did experience quite a bit more fallout with this palette than I have experienced with melt shadows in the past. I do think that they're very buildable. They work well with each other. They play well with others, and that they were just really beautiful to play with. I had no problems with this palette whatsoever. I love the palette. Like, what more can I say? I do think that the green and the purple, you still have to work just, you know, just so to make it happen. I'm used to, with Melt Cosmetics shadows specifically, straight up pigmentation. So the first couple times I used it, it was harder for me to distinguish whether I liked the palette or not based on how I was able to get it to work for me. versus how I've been able to get melt to work for me in the past, right? So I felt like I had to work harder for it, but in the grand scheme of things, I really didn't. It blended really well. And I think that that's maybe where I was getting kind of off put, was that I had to build it more than I have had to build Melt Cosmetics shadows in the past. I felt like you had a lot more control with these shadows in this palette than I have felt with Melt Cosmetics eyeshadows in the past as well. On Melt, this does have a 5-star rating, but there's only one review. And on Sephora, it has a 4.2 star rating. There's only 10 reviews, but of those 10 reviews, there's only 3 of them that are specifically talking about this palette. I would say I would probably rank this in the 4.6 star rating factor if I needed to. I feel like if you are also interested in a melt formula but are not interested in the finicky, finesse nature of the bigger palettes, this would probably be the palette I would start you out on, or one of its counterparts. But I really, really love the larger palette melt formula a lot more than I liked this one. Not that this one is bad, but I like that formula better just because I like straight up pigmentation and then to blend it out, not having to work it up, right? As I said, ABH, Natasha Denona, those are my favorites, and Melt is one of those because it's straight up pigmentation. I can blend it out from there. This one I had to build. The wear time on it is approximately 6 hours, which I also think is a lot less wear time than I typically get from a Melt Cosmetics eyeshadow palette. Typical Melt palette for me, I think consistently I was seeing like an 8 to 10 to 12 hour wear time. With this one, it was more like 6 to 8. But the shimmers I felt like were maybe just a slight bit better because they are less dense. I saw that there was a lot less creasing with these ones than I have seen with my Melt eyeshadows that were shimmer in the past. So I'm really pleased with this palette, if I'm honest. I feel attacked by the names of the shadows, but I'm really pleased with the palette. It reminds me a lot of the ABH Subculture palette, which is one of my favorites. So I'm going to swatch this one for you. I'm going to go straight across and then straight across. All right, so the first one is the dark green, and that one is the shade Heart of Stone. It's kind of like a foresty green matte. And then we had Way Harsh, which is a mustard yellow matte. Then we have Overcritical, which is a gold shimmer. And then we have Know It All, which is a orange shimmer. Then we have RBF, which is kind of like a peachy color with a little bit of tan in it. I feel like it's not straight up orange. And then we have Materialistic, which is in my eye look today, is kind of this like rosy bronze. Really, really pretty. Then we have Type A, which is a really deep plum purple. Then we have Stubborn, which is a kind of a taupey tan. You guys can see like the pigmentation straight out of the gate on these guys. It's a crazy sauce. Such a beautiful, beautiful palette. I will tell you, this one, the green and the purple, will stain your eyes. With the FESTIE Bestie, that dark blue also stained my eyes. But there wasn't anything else in that palette that stained my eyes. This one, the shadows, the Melt palette, the shadows don't feel as silky as they do in this palette. Pressed pigments more than likely, and these are just, regular old eyeshadows. So there's that. Again, this one, not my favorite, not mad at it, but it wasn't my favorite. I just didn't feel like, I don't feel like it's worth the $18 that they're charging for it. Now, granted, you can get that one on sale a whole lot more often than you could get a Melt palette on sale, but I just don't feel like it was worth it. Honestly, it didn't perform in the way that I thought it needed to for the price point. I understand it's drugstore, but you can get a lot better shadows than those for that same price point. This one, star of the show. I wanted to wear it all the time. It is what is mostly in my eye look today. Today I do have these two shades. As I said, I have this shade on my lid space. That is all that is on my lid space. And then I pulled in this, I pulled in this yellow underneath to buff out, and also up towards my brow bone to buff out. But I also have this shade is the only one from this palette that I have in my eye look today. So I'm going to go pull my next palette set up, and then I will be right back. All right, guys, I am going to have an Urban Decay moment for my next palette roulette. And I have a lot of videos that I have planned, like end of year videos that I have planned for this month. So I'm not sure that you'll see this in 2 weeks. It might be another 3 weeks before you see this one. But I am going to review the 3 remaining Urban Decay palettes that I have in my collection next time we're together. And I think it's going to be an interesting one and probably long because there's a lot more than 20 eyeshadows here. But I do have the Urban Decay Wired palette, which looks like this. And I think that this was the sister palette to one of my favorite Urban Decay palettes, which is the Urban Decay Electric. It's the only Urban Decay palette that I have kept in my collection for ever since I purchased it. I love that palette. It's what was the catalyst for my YouTube channel. So we're going to see how we feel about its best friend. And I know that this palette has not seen some really great reviews on the interwebs, so I'm interested to see how much I like it. We're also going to be looking at this little tiny mini guy, the Urban Decay Naked Half Baked palette. This is very neutral. Very, very neutral, but somehow calls my name. I love, love, love the look of this shadow right here. I'm really excited to use that, but this is going to be interesting to see how I can, but I think it'll go well with all the neons. But then I also have the Urban Decay X Robin Eisenberg Naked palette, and it looks like this. And its color story is a little more like colorful, but also subdued. I think that these colors obviously will get some use. These colors I feel like are also in that little tiny half-baked, so we'll see how that goes. If you guys have tried any of these palettes or the ones that I just reviewed, please let me know what your thoughts and opinions are on them. I would love to hear from you down in the comments section. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I appreciate every single one of you, and I'm glad that we're going into 2023 together, if I'm honest. And thank you guys just again so much for being here. I hope that you guys are having an amazing new year as it is right now, and that you have great plans for 2023. And I can't wait to like share growth and our plans with you throughout this year. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I hope that you and yours are healthy, that you're safe, that you're well, that you're getting along as best you can in this crazy world that we are living in currently. I hope that you are all loving each other, but loving each other from afar. And until next time, bye friends.